Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them, and they should get what they want. Thank you friends for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story, the neighbor who tried to turn me into a free babysitter, crazy or just entitled. The second story, escaping an unreasonable boss, my journey to happiness and a pay raise. The third story, I offered you my help. You refused. Now it's your problem, not mine. The first story is, stop sending your kid over. I am not a babysitter. At first, I wasn't sure if this was an entitled parent story, because I think this woman is just plain crazy. But after reading a few of these, I figured out that crazy and entitled are one and the same. Years ago, this new neighbor of mine, she had recently moved to a house on the next street over, kept trying for the better part of a summer to use me as a free babysitter. It started when her kid, who was really a cute, well-behaved kid about 7 years old, showed up at my door at 7:15 in the morning. We were all just waking up and getting around, so I told him that my boys weren't ready to play yet, and to come back in a few hours. That is when the kid told me his mom had gone to work. This seemed a bit odd to me, so I brought him in and tried to call his mom. This was the time of only landlines. Sure enough, she was gone. So I brought him in and fed him breakfast. He stayed with us the rest of the day, and he got along well with my 2 boys who were 5 and 10. I'd only talked to his mom about 2 times, so I had no idea why she would think this was a good idea. When his mom came home, I walked him over so I could talk to her. I told her not to do that again. I told her that I would be willing to watch him on occasion if asked first, but not every day. Her response was, well, what else do you have to do all day? This kinda took me by surprise. I tried to tell her that I worked at home on commissions. She rolled her eyes and told me that being an artist isn't a real job, and besides I was married so I didn't need to work. I should have pointed out to her that she was married and working, but I felt myself getting angry and I didn't want to argue with her. Just don't do that again, I said to her. You have teenage kids home for the summer. Have them babysit. She frowned at me and said, they work. I said, so do I. Then I went home. The next morning at 7:15, the kid sheepishly shows up again. Once again, I bring him in and feed him breakfast and later lunch. Once again, I took him to his home and once again told his mother to please not do that again. She actually tried to tell me that it was my neighborly duty to watch him, and I told her that if she sent him tomorrow, I wouldn't be there because of a doctor's appointment. She said that as a babysitter, I should have given her several days' notice about this. I angrily told her I was not a babysitter and then went home. The next morning, I made my 7 a.m. appointment. Blood work, that's why it was so early. I did some grocery shopping afterward, and it was about 10 a.m. when I got home. The poor kid was waiting for me on my porch. He had been there for nearly 3 hours, and the little guy was scared and hungry. That night when I took the kid home, I was angry. I told her how the kid was scared and alone. She actually said that she had told me I hadn't given her enough time to find anyone else, and that his being alone was my fault. I pointed at her and said, I'm not a babysitter. Don't send him over again. That night, this woman had her adult nephew call me to scream at me for not being home when his poor aunt dropped her son off. How dare I leave a small child alone like that? I told the nephew that his aunt knew I wasn't home, so it was her that left the child all alone. I said that I had repeatedly asked his aunt not to send the kid over anymore and I was not a babysitter. This nephew freaked out at me when I said that and I hung up on his screaming at me. This worked for 2 wonderful quiet days, then right back to it. I tried everything, but this woman insisted that it was my neighborly duty to babysit and would tell me as much. Finally, I decided that to solve this problem, I would just get a job outside of my home, and that way she would have to stop. I was too much of a pacifist back then. I no longer am. I landed an interview for a position at the local library and I was ecstatic. I told the woman to keep her son home because I had arranged for my kids to stay with their grandmother while I went to this interview. The next morning, I drove to my mother-in-law's house and took my kids inside. When I went to leave, I found this woman's kid waiting for me in my car. She had actually followed me there and put her son in my unlocked car, and then zoomed off while I was dropping off my boys. My mother-in-law wasn't the most flexible person in the world, and she adamantly refused to watch an extra kid. I had to cancel my interview. I was livid. I toyed with several ideas at this moment. I could take the kid to her job and leave him with her, or I could call the police and CPS. I really wasn't sure how stable this woman's job was, and I didn't want her to get fired. And when I went to go call the CPS, I chickened out because it really wouldn't be fair to the little boy. Besides, I had heard really scary stories about CPS. In the end, I just waited for her to come home. I left the boy at my house with my hubby. I planned on doing a lot of cussing, and I stomped over to her house and met her before she even got out of her car. I shouted at her. I told her she was dense, stupid, moronic, and crazy. I told her that she had lost me my job interview, and if she sent her kid over to be watched again, I was going to call CPS and the police. I told her that she was violating my space, and if it took going to court to get her to knock it off, then so be it. She then put her hand on her hip, and in her most snotty tone, she said, "Well, if you didn't want to sit with him, all you had to do was tell me." I really do not know how I kept from punching her right then and there. This comment was so asinine. I turned on my heels to start stomping home when I saw her husband pulling up. Now, this was the first time I had ever met her husband. He worked at a job that only allowed him to be home on weekends. I can't blame him. I wouldn't want to be around her either. But when she saw him, she turned tail and ran into her house. He saw that I was upset and asked me what had happened. I told him all of it, especially the incident at my mother-in-law's. The poor man was shocked. He had been told that I was being paid, and he had been giving her money to pay me. He had no idea all this had been going on, and he was very, very apologetic over the whole thing. In fact, he apologized again to my husband when he came over to pick up his little boy. Finally, she stopped sending her kid over. Later, I heard from others that she was bad-mouthing me and warning folks about what a horrid babysitter I was, but I took that as a favor. I didn't want to babysit any kids other than my own, and I still hate doing so. I don't hate the kids. I love kids. It's dealing with the parents that I don't like. The kid came over only once in a while after that to play with my kids, after he called first to get permission, exactly the way it should be done. I'm sure his dad had something to do with that because the kid only came over on weekends. This is one of a few stories I have involving this crazy lady. Her only entertainment in life seems to be seeing how bizarre she can act in this neighborhood. I'm luckier than my other neighbors in the fact that she leaves me alone now, and I'm very happy with that. With each successive story like this, I'm just amazed at people's arrogance. I'm just shocked. People like that really do exist. Gosh, I think you should have at least reported her to the police when she didn't realize the second time that you aren't a free babysitter. I think in such a case, the father of the child would have found out about everything much earlier, and you would not have had to waste effort and nerves on this whole situation. I sincerely feel sorry for the husband and child of this talentless, entitled woman. I can't even call her a mother. And I would also demand compensation from her. Exactly from her and not from her husband. Maybe some work in the garden or cleaning in the lawn would do her good. Because to trust her with something more than grass is not rational, judging by her attitude to her own child. But still, OP, I'm glad you handled the situation with dignity. The second story is, left after my boss refused to show basic human decency. He's now paying me time and a half of extra comp to train my replacement. I worked for a department at a university for 6 years, total 11 years at the university. I was the admin person for grant-funded stuff. My boss was sometimes okay and sometimes awful, but never great. End of 2021, I had a lot of unpleasant personal stuff going on, but I didn't let it affect my work. I took a week off over the summer and a day or two here and there, but even then I made sure to respond to any time-sensitive stuff. My boss got worse and worse with communication. I think WFH made him forget we're all humans and not mind-reading robots. He sent some extremely unprofessional emails to me about my performance, but anytime I asked what I could do better or was failing at specifically, he just refused to answer. Ended up talking to the ombuds for guidance then HR. We set up a meeting to just clear the air and get on the same page, or so I thought. I made no accusations, just tried to express what I felt was missing communication-wise. It was a train wreck. My boss barely spoke and had clearly coached the HR guy on what to say. I sobbed my way through the meeting. But that night I decided I was done. I got along with my coworkers, but I'm not going to stay miserable. Applied to a few openings, including some at other departments, and had an interview a week later. Another week passes and then offer me the job. Slightly different, but nothing I haven't done before. I accept, and just before the Christmas holiday, I give my 2 weeks. I've been at my new job a little over 2 months, and holy SH, I've never been more relaxed and happy. It put into perspective just how overworked and underpaid I was. Funny enough, my old boss asked if I would stay on 10 hours a week to help my replacement at time and a half. My replacement is someone I already knew and had promised I would help her learn the ropes, so I said sure. I might as well get paid for helping. That extra comp has been extended to the end of April now, huh? From what I hear, they're hurting without me. I feel for my replacement, though. They're expecting her to be able to step in like I never even left, when she has no experience with admin work and is not familiar with the systems we use. I'm doing my best to help her, but I won't go 1 minute over those 10 hours a week. Oh, the classic tale of boss versus basic human decency. It's like watching a reality show where the boss is the antagonist, and basic human decency is the hero who ultimately triumphs. I mean, who doesn't love a boss who's I'll communicate with you when I feel like it, and you better be a mind-reading robot to keep up. But you, the hero of the story, decided enough was enough. You left that stressful circus and embarked on a journey to the land of relaxation and happiness, also known as a new job. And guess what? You found your pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And it's not just a rainbow, it's a double rainbow. Now your old boss is practically begging for your help at a premium rate, while your replacement tries to navigate the maze of admin work like a lost kitten in a yarn store. But hey, you're not sticking around to untangle that mess, are you? The third story is, person who replaced me is asking for paperwork I threw away over a year ago after they said they didn't need it. I used to work pretty much managing the entire venue side of a bar. I booked bands, promoted shows on near every platform, managed sound engineers and worked sound when I had to, was in charge of venue maintenance, and worked the door when I wasn't running around managing the store. I used to keep draw sheets from when the bands would play, and I'd pay them off the draw and would usually kick the lowest drawing bands some extra cash. I eventually quit after 4 years of working there and being overworked and underappreciated. The burnout was real. The guy who replaced me was familiar to me. I texted the dude who replaced me if he wanted 4 years worth of draw sheets because I was about to throw them out, because I didn't need them anymore. He said to go ahead and throw them away. I told him I'd be killing someone for this info and emphasized that. He just said he'd collect his own, so I threw them away. Earlier this week, he calls me and asks me about them and if I still have them. I tell him no, and that I threw them away at the same day I asked him. He flips his SH and starts demanding my planners, which went back 6 years since I had nabbed the 2 years before on my way out. I just told him no and that I would have gladly made him copies had he not come at me all sideways. I hung up on him. Not even 5 minutes later, my old boss calls. Of course I ignore it because why am I going to answer a call from my old boss? He leaves me a message that I need to straight up give Dude Buddy the planners, not copies, the whole thing. He went on to say I'm stealing from them, and he didn't want to press charges over the folding tables I took. Those tables were mine and I'd love to see him prove those planners are property of the bar. Get bent. I already had picked up some freelance gigs booking and working sound, and it's 100% more enjoyable than my last few weeks there. Might as well be sipping margaritas on the beach compared to there. They both can get effed. Oh, the audacity of the guy who replaced you. It's like he suddenly realized that the information he casually dismissed as trash is now his precious treasure. And when he demanded your planners with such entitlement, it's as if he believed you were running a charity for disorganized colleagues. Then your old boss joins the circus with his voicemail melodrama, accusing you of grand theft planner. Seriously, who knew that folding tables and event planners could be such hot commodity? But let's focus on the positive. You've moved on to greener pastures, sipping margaritas on the beach of freelance gigs, while they wrestle with their misplaced priorities. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.